Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering the most terrifying character in the game. Fear is a mechanic that's always really fascinated me in video games. The idea of a warrior so terrifying that enemies can't help but run away at the very sight of them is something that I find deeply compelling. Probably it's my inner goth from the 90s coming back to haunt me, as it were. But Baldur's Gate's implementation of fear mechanics, I've always felt, left something to be desired. There's only a few characters that get to frighten enemies at all, and the way that they do so is often passive, rather than something that you actively choose to do in order to terrify enemies into submission. Luckily, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons has a lot of focus on fear mechanics, including a subclass built around terrifying enemies, the Oath of Conquest Paladin. That Paladin subclass isn't in Baldur's Gate by default, but we can add it using a mod, and we're using a mod that's available on PC and on Mac and console, so anybody can use this to add the Oath of Conquest to their game. This is my personal favorite Paladin subclass, and one with an incredible playstyle, and I like the mod implementation, so we're building this character today to terrify our enemies into submission, while obliterating them with swings from our mighty weapon. Alright, let's get to the build. Before I begin though, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to everyone who's been watching. If I've timed this video correctly, this will be going up Christmas morning. And so if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. That's also the first day of Hanukkah this year, so if you celebrate Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah. If you don't celebrate holidays at all at this time of year, I wish you a wonderful couple weeks, and I hope that this year has been excellent for all of you. This has been an incredible year for me, and I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's been watching and commenting and everything. In particular, in this video, I want to say thank you so much to Tarantula for the $10 donation, Toaster Lad for the $10, Mara Staines for the $10, and Frater Perdurabo for the incredibly generous €100 donation. Thank you so much, my friends, and thank you to all of you. I really appreciate all of your support. It really means so much to me that everyone has been enjoying these videos, and I hope to continue to bring them to you in the year to come. Alright, let's get to the build. Because this is a modded build, I'm of course going to show you what mod we're using, so we're going to search here for Oath of Conquest. And we are going to pull up the Oath of Conquest mod by Havsglimt. This is the mod that's available on Mac and console, as well as on PC, so this is the one we're using for this video. It has one requirement, but that'll just install automatically as soon as you install the mod, so you just have to click the enable button, and you are ready to go. I'm using Minthara here as the example character because this is a Paladin build, and as an Oath of Conquest Paladin built around terrifying your enemies into submission, I think it fits Minthara extremely well. Honestly, I think Oath of Conquest would have been an excellent subclass for her as her canonical subclass if it had been in the game from the beginning, so I think this fits for Minthara's character quite perfectly. But of course you can build this as a custom character, and if you do, we get all the proficiencies that we need from our character itself. So, for race selection, you can really pick either based on flavor, or for the powerful racial abilities of, for example, the Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for additional movement speed, Githyanki, which will make us both better at being a party face, because we can know all of the intelligence skills for free, as well as giving us Misty Step once per day, very useful for a melee character, or Halfling to reroll 1s, Gnome to reroll mental saving throws, or Dwergar to be invisible outside of combat. All of those are the normal ones that I recommend. I think Githyanki fits incredibly well for this character in terms of its mechanics, so that would be the optimal choice I would recommend, but any race will fit very well and you will not lose out on much depending on what you pick. For our subclass, of course, we are starting with Oath of Conquest, and we are taking a Paladin level as our first level, although we will be multi-classing here. And because we will be multi-classing, our ability score selection is going to look somewhat unusual for a Paladin, because we're actually not going to be taking any strength. This will be a Palok build, so we are going to be using Charisma to attack using Pact of the Blade Warlock. Therefore, we're going to be taking 16 in dexterity, because we'll need our dexterity to attack with a finesse weapon up until we hit level 4 and get the ability to attack with charisma. So in the early game, you're going to be using a short sword, dagger, rapier, or something along those lines in order to attack with a melee weapon. So we'll take 16 dexterity, 14 constitution, 12 wisdom, and 16 charisma in order to make our character as powerful as possible once we're able to use our charisma to attack. Because we're taking high charisma here, the save DC on our Oath of Conquest abilities and the save DC on our Warlock abilities will also be as strong as possible, making this character even better at terrifying enemies, especially in the early game. For our skill selection here, the most important thing is that we have Persuasion. You just want to make sure that this character can act as the party face. As a charisma character, we're going to be able to do all of our dialogue. And then we can go ahead and take Insight here because Paladins get access to that and not a lot of other party face characters do. So that's an advantage Paladin face characters have over other characters. And any other dialogue skills that you might want. Basically, we're just taking as many charisma skills as we can possibly get, because this will be our party face. That's it for our decisions at level 1, but let's take a look at our Oath of Conquest abilities, because of course, that's why we're here. At level 1 in Oath of Conquest, we get the Chosen Adversary ability. This is very similar to the Vengeance Paladin's level 3 ability that allows them to mark a target and gain advantage on attacks against that target. Make it as a bonus action for our Channel Oath charge, and we gain advantage on attack rolls against that enemy. Unlike the Oath of Vengeance ability, it's not bugged. You can't self-cast this and gain advantage on everybody, so this requires you to actually choose a specific enemy. When you hit that enemy, they have to make a saving throw or they become frightened until the end of their next turn or when they take damage. So every time you attack the enemy that you have marked for death, they can potentially become frightened, preventing them from moving, giving them disadvantage on attacks. So you can hit an enemy and then disengage from a melee enemy, for example. They will have disadvantage on their attack of opportunity to hit you and then not be able to attack on their subsequent turn. This is a great way to lock down a boss if you frighten the enemy or force them to attack this character, who will probably be pretty tanky compared to your other characters, so that the most dangerous enemy in the encounter is often wasting their action. Free crowd control like this is always incredible, so we're very, very happy to have anything that gives us additional crowd control without having to take an action to use it. The Oath of Conquest tenets are listed here. I will say I've played this character a little bit in Baldur's Gate 3, a modded character. I've played about, 3 hours of a playthrough. I have not played it all the way through the game, so I can't say for sure how well Oathbreaking is implemented throughout the entire game in this mod. Just a little disclaimer there, but I did manage to break my oath in the early game, so it's implemented at least reasonably well. Your mileage may vary on that aspect of the mod. The way that Oathbreaking works in Baldur's Gate has always been a bit of a pet peeve for me, because I think it's too easy to do it accidentally. So that's not a huge concern for me, but depending on how you like to roleplay your paladins, it may be more of one for you. That's it for level 1. Let's move on to level 2. Character level 2, we're immediately going to dip out of Paladin and take a level of Warlock. We want to get to our Pact of the Blade feature as soon as possible, and we also want more combat power in the early game with our charisma, so Warlock gives us both of these things as soon as we can get them. Because this is a fear-based build, we are of course going to be taking as our subclass the Great Old One Warlock, although I will say this is also a really excellent opportunity to play Archfey Warlock if you haven't done that. Fey Presence is also a fear-focused effect that will give you a gigantic AoE frighten in the early game and can lock down a large group of enemies. It's even better than Great Old One in the early game, though Great Old One will overtake it in the late game, so I think from a power level standpoint, Great Old One gets the nod here. But Archfey Warlock fits this extremely well thematically as well as mechanically, so a great excuse to play one as well, though for this example build, we're going for Great Old One. Mortal Reminder, of course, frightens enemies in an AoE whenever we land a critical hit, so we're going to be passing out a ton of debuffs every single turn of combat while we're playing this character. For our cantrip selection here, we are going with Eldritch Blast, because Eldritch Blast gives us an excellent ranged combat option using our Charisma, which we will be using throughout the entire game. Because it fires multiple beams, it can also have a very high chance of critically hitting, so this character can use that to create ranged fear effect. while we're also creating melee fear effects with our Oath of Conquest abilities. And then for our second cantrip, we are taking Blade Ward. You could also pick up Friends or for better party face abilities or Minor Illusion to gather enemies, but Blade Ward is very useful for a melee character to have access to. If you are using a dedicated healer that's giving you Blade Ward from the Hellrider's Pride gloves, then you won't need to take this on your character as much, but this is a great emergency option if you're surrounded by enemies. Sometimes you just need to stall for a turn, and taking half damage for a turn is really useful on a melee character like this one. For our spell selection at level 1, we're taking Dissonant Whispers, the best combat spell for a Warlock at level 1, and we're going to be taking Hex. Hex will, of course, up our damage, especially on Eldritch Blasts, and because this character has only the one bonus action that we want to use, and that's on an Oath of, or a Channeled Divinity charge, Hex gives us another powerful bonus action that ups our damage in the early game. Pretty standard fare for a level 1 Warlock, but of course we want to complement the terrifying presence of this character, so that's what we're going with as we move on to level 3. Character level 3, we're taking our second level of Warlock, getting access to additional spells and Eldritch Invocations. For our spells here, we're going to be taking Armor of Agathys. This is just a powerful spell for any melee character to have. Now, Oath of Conquest Paladin actually will get Armor of Agathys as a known spell later on. So later we will either respec once we get that to swap it out, or I'll just show you swapping it out next level. Armor of Agathys is really good in the early game, but we'll get another copy of this later, so eventually we're going to want to replace it with another spell. For our Eldritch Invocations here, we're taking exactly the same ones that most Warlocks are going to take. Agonizing Blast to add our Charisma to our Eldritch Blast damage, making our ranged damage really powerful in addition to our extremely powerful melee damage, and Devil's Sight so that we can hide in a cloud of darkness, becoming immune to ranged attacks, gaining advantage on all of our attacks, which makes us critically hit more often, so we will be frightening enemies more frequently with our Great Old One Warlock class features, and then also giving us the ability to be completely immune to ranged attacks. Enemies have disadvantage on attacks. Darkness is just one of the most powerful strategies in Baldur's Gate 3, and Devil's Sight means that we can use it and abuse it for incredible tactical facility. As a half drow, or as a drow, of course, Minthara will also get extra casts of darkness, which will be really nice in order to optimize this effect and make it even more powerful because we can just use it more often. That's it for level 3. Let's go to level 4. And at level 4, we're taking our third level of Warlock, getting access to our Pact boon, which of course is going to be Pact of the Blade. This is going to allow us to make melee weapon attacks using our Charisma instead of our Strength or Dexterity. So obviously we could be using a finesse weapon up until this point, but now we can use a two-handed strength-based weapon or a one-handed strength-based weapon. This just gives us a lot more options for our weapon, and also lets us raise our charisma for this character, which makes the save DC on our fear effect even more powerful. Finding a weapon here is going to just give us a lot more options for the gear that we can use, and make the character much stronger overall. For our spell selection at this level, of course, we are going to be taking Darkness, and we're going to replace a spell here. I'm going to swap out Armor of Agathys, which we will be getting from our Oath of Conquest levels, for Cloud of Daggers or Hold Person. Either of these are going to be really good. If you need AoE damage, Cloud of Daggers is better. If you want to lock down an enemy, Hold Person is going to be better. Here I'm going to take Cloud of Daggers. Hold Person gets you guaranteed criticals, which can, of course, make your fear effect even stronger, but we will be able to pick that up later in the build as well. At this level in particular, you might want to keep Armor of Agathys and swap out Dissonant Whispers, and then do a respec once you get Armor of Agathys from your Oath of Conquest levels, but this will be what the final build will look like. At character level 5, we are going back to Paladin, getting access, of course, to Paladin Smites, which increases our damage dramatically. This character now can use our Warlock spell slots, or level 2 spell slots, to make a smite attack, damaging enemies for an incredible amount of bonus damage, while also terrifying them into submission. We also get a fighting style here. So the fighting style is interesting. In the end game, there is a shield that we want, but we won't get that until Act 3. So I'm going to recommend taking the Great Weapon fighting style for the early game. It just increases your damage a little bit more. But later, we will want to swap to the defense fighting style. You could also just take defense later on. Or you can also just take defense now. +1 armor class is always going to be very good and relevant, but we will probably be using a two-handed weapon up until the late game, at which point we're going to swap to a one-handed weapon and shield, because there's a shield that's so good for this build. So we want Great Weapon Fighting to optimize our damage with weapons up until that point. For our prepared spells at this level, we are going to go with the most powerful Paladin spells, the ones that we're most likely to cast. Bless is just very good for every character to have access to. Command is an incredibly potent spell, and because we took our high charisma, we can cause enemies to drop to the ground very easily and grovel in front of us. Very thematic also for the Oath of Conquest Paladin. Thunderous Smite can be activated in the same attack as a normal smite attack. If you have your smites set to reaction, you can cast Thunderous Smite and then react to hitting with it with another smite using 2 spell slots for even more damage on a single attack. So this gives you a huge amount of burst damage. And is an incredibly powerful strategy for paladins. And then for our last 2 spells, we're just going to take stuff that's kind of situational. Protection from evil and good is useful in some fights. You can use heroism as a immunity to frightened, and burst healing if you happen to, or sustained healing if you happen to need it in one fight. Typically, you will not be casting these spells. Your spell slots are going to go for things like Cloud of Daggers, Darkness, and Paladin Smite more than these spells. And when you do cast a spell, it's usually going to be command. Other than those, it's usually going to be command, but these are situationally useful, so good to prepare in case we want them. At character level 6, we're taking our 3rd level of Paladin, getting access to our Oath of Conquest subclass features. We get 2 subclass features at this level. The first of these is Guided Strike, giving us a +10 bonus to an attack roll. This is an incredibly powerful boost. Obviously, it doesn't mean you automatically hit with this attack roll, but it makes you very, very likely to hit with this attack. So it's very useful to land important smite attacks on an enemy that you really need to damage right away. If you use Guided Strike and then also use a smite or a thunderous smite and a smite, then you can basically guarantee killing an enemy on the first turn of combat with the incredible amount of burst damage and accuracy that gives you. So this is a very useful ability to make certain that you are actually killing enemies as you need to, and killing the most important enemies before they get to act. We also now get the coolest thing about Oath of Conquest Paladin, the Fear Aura. With Conquering Presence, we can spend a Channel Oath charge in order to frighten everything around us. Every enemy around us has to make a saving throw or they become fearful, which is different from frightened. So fearful means they have to run away. Frightened means they can't move. So it's interesting that there are 2 different conditions that both have basically the same name in 5th edition. But the way that this one works is the enemy will be running directly away from us. That's even better because this is effectively a stun. They won't be able to do anything because they can't take additional actions and they have to run away. So the enemies who are succumbed to this ability are stunned. A gigantic AoE stun is an incredibly powerful ability, so any enemy who's not immune to this effect, we can absolutely ruin with the Conquering Presence action. For our prepared spells at this level, we now have Command and Armor of Agathis as just known spells, so we don't need to prepare them. Specifically, we will just always have them prepared, so we can pick up the more situational spells that we didn't take earlier. In general, you won't be casting spells. Armor of Agathis and Command are spells you'll be casting. Thunderous Smite you'll be casting occasionally, and your Warlock spells you'll still be casting. Our spell slots are mostly still just used for smite attacks, though. So the extra spells at this level will not matter that much, but it's really nice that we get 2 very powerful spells, just always known and always prepared. And character level 7, we are taking our 4th level of Paladin, getting our first feat. The feat that we're taking here is going to be an ability improvement to bump up our charisma, making our attacks more likely to land, both at range with Eldritch Blast and in melee with the Pact of the Blade Warlock feature, making our melee attacks use our charisma to attack. This also increases the save DC on both our spells and our frightened effects, so enemies that we hit with our Fear aura are now going to be stunned even more reliably. Enemies that we critically hit or critically hit their allies are more likely going to be frightened and unable to move and have disadvantage on their attacks. So the amount of crowd control that we're passing out for free has just increased dramatically with the save DC increase on increasing our charisma. It's worth noting also that because we attack with our charisma and have a high charisma for save DCs, this is one of the best Illithid Power users in the game. A character that both makes weapon attacks and casts spells and uses the same stat for both is going to be always an incredible Illithid Power user, which is part of why it fits so well for Minthara, since she comes with these Illithid Powers from the beginning of the game. At character level 8, we're getting our 5th level of Paladin, gaining extra attack. Not only does that double our damage, it also doubles our chance of getting critical hits and landing more fears, gives us more opportunities to smite in a turn, so is incredibly valuable for the character. I will say this is a somewhat delayed extra attack, so you could also just play this character as a standard Paladin up until level 7, and then respec to the Paladin Warlock hybrid build at level 8 in order to optimize our charisma usage. I personally haven't found it to be a massive issue for these characters because each of our attacks hits so hard with smite that we don't have a second attack. But your mileage may vary, and extra attack, of course, is an incredibly powerful feature, so getting it earlier is never something that I would, that is always something that I'm happy to suggest doing. So that's another option if you don't mind using respecs during the run. For our spell selection at this level, we now have access to level 2 Paladin spells. Mostly these Paladin spells that we get, we're not going to cast, but the ones that we get from Oath of Conquest are incredible. Spiritual Weapon at this level is a distraction, basically, but sometimes you need a distraction, and sometimes it can be worth spending a level 2 Warlock spell slot once per short rest just to spit out a Spiritual Weapon and absorb an attack from an enemy. It's a bonus action that doesn't require your concentration. And we get Hold Person, which is the most powerful crowd control effect in the game, and gives us guaranteed critical hits, which can then be used to spread fear to more enemies if those enemies are near the target of our Hold Person. So not only does this lock down one enemy if you land it on them, it also lets you lock down more enemies and is incredibly powerful for this character. For our prepared spells at this level, we don't really need to update them significantly, though you can take some of the more situational spells like Lesser Restoration and Protection from Poison, just to potentially have access to those. You can also use Magic Weapon. Because we have Warlock spell slots, which come back on a short rest, we can turn those short rest spell slots into a long rest resource by casting Magic Weapon on ourselves. And just giving ourselves a +1 bonus for the entire long rest with a resource that we get back on a short rest. So Magic Weapon is kind of nice for the lock-it-in builds because of how Warlock spell slots work. Character level 9. We get Aura of Protection, giving all of our allies, it says +0 bonus. The tooltip here is still broken 2 years after release of this game. But this is a bonus to our saving throws equal to our charisma bonus. So at this level, it will be a +4 to all of our saving throws for ourselves and all of our allies that are within 10 feet of us. An incredible bonus that just makes you basically immune to frightened from enemies, and your whole party immune to frightened from enemies, because the Oath of Conquest Paladin says the only thing you can be afraid of is me. At Paladin level 7, we get access to Aura of Conquest, the Oath of Conquest Paladin feature. There's two halves to this aura. So firstly, if an enemy's frightened of you, it reduces their movement speed to 0. Now, a frightened enemy normally has move speed reduced to 0, but this also works on fearful enemies. So those enemies normally run away from you and can't take actions. The Aura of Conquest prevents them from running away, so if they're fearful of you, they will just have to stand still. They won't be able to do any action, converting fearful from a partial stun, where enemies can still run away, to a complete stun, where enemies can't do anything at all. Also, if they start their turn in the aura, they take half your paladin level in psychic damage at the beginning of each of their turns. That's not a lot of damage, but it does add up, and you can proc Rider effect. For example, if you have Falar Eluve, an excellent weapon for this character, it will proc the bonus damage from Falar, and so it can be used to then proc Reverberation and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different cool effects you can do with this kind of passive AoE damage. The main bonus here is that fearful enemies will no longer be able to run from you, which is both extremely thematic, because there's just no escape. They can no longer run or hide. And also is going to make it just a little bit easier to hunt down enemies when you've locked them down with your Conquering Presence aura. For our prepared spells at this level, we have no changes since we haven't gotten access to any new spells, so we've just gotten a little more powerful with passive damage and enemies being constantly locked down and stunned completely. At character level 11, you actually have a choice, and it depends a little bit on your difficulty settings. If you're playing on Tactician or below, we're going to take 2 more levels of Warlock. The reason for this is that the Pact of the Blade Warlock's class feature, extra attack class feature, stacks with the Paladin extra attack class feature on Tactician difficulty or lower. So if you have both of them, you get 3 attacks every turn. Obviously, 3 attacks every turn is better than like almost anything else that you can get. So on Tactician mode or lower, you want to take more levels of Warlock in order to get the maximum number of attacks. On Honor mode, those class features don't stack. So on Honor mode, we're going to be taking additional levels of Paladin to max out our Paladin class features and the psychic damage that we get from the Aura of Conquest. As well as getting an additional feat. But there will be a slight difference depending on what difficulty setting you're playing on as to which levels you take next. We're going to show the Honor mode build here, but I wanted to mention that for Tactician players, you definitely are going to want to take the 4th and 5th level of Warlock so that you get 3 attacks in a round. For our feat here, we're going to take an ability improvement and just max out our charisma. Maximized charisma, of course, increases our chance to hit, increases our damage, and increases the save DC of our fear effects and spells. What's not to love? Just maxing charisma on these characters is always going to be the best option. And finally, at character level 12, we are going to take our 3rd level of Paladin, gaining fear, so we have yet another way to cause an AoE fear effect. So this spell, of course, is going to have very high save DC, because we've got 20 charisma, and AoE fears enemies, which is an incredibly powerful effect. Fear is, I think, one of the most underrated crowd control spells in the game. It hits in a cone, so it's pretty easy to line it up to hit the enemies that you want to hit, and it's good in melee range, which this character will often be in, and it's just an incredibly powerful debuff, especially with the bonuses to fear that you get by being an Oath of Conquest Paladin. For our other 3rd level spells at this level, Warden of Vitality is a great one to have prepared. This can give you a ton of healing if you need it in a given encounter. Crusader's Mantle can buff your whole party up, so if you're doing a more summon-focused party, Crusader's Mantle can be very good. Daylight's useful in some encounters. Again, these spells are mostly going to be used for smite attacks and for casting fear, but the more situational options like Daylight or even Remove Curse can be useful to have prepared for when you happen to need them. Alright, that is it for the Oath of Conquest Paladin build, but of course this character can be improved even further with items and Illithid Powers, so let's talk about those. 4 items for this character. One of the great things about this character is that it is actually very open when it comes to itemization, but still gets access to several of the most powerful item combinations in the game. So firstly, there's one item that stands head and shoulders above all of the others for this character, and that, of course, is the Act 3 shield, the Shield of the Undevout. The Shield of the Undevout gives enemies disadvantage on saving throws against anything that inflicts fear, and it does work with all of the Oath of Conquest abilities, so enemies will have disadvantage on all of your fear effects when you have this shield equipped. That means that you will be constantly fearing enemies, even more so than you would be otherwise, because they will, you have a very high save DC with your charisma on the fear effect, and enemies will have disadvantage on the saves, so they will be failing absolutely constantly. It also gives you an extra spell slot, which is pretty nice, because that's just an extra smite every day, so the Shield of the Undevoured is good for another reason as well. Before we get this item, we're usually going to want to use a two-handed weapon, though of course you can just use a one-handed weapon and shield for the rest of the game as well. But the weapons that I recommend for the early game are the Unseen Menace or the Soulbreaker Greatsword. The Soulbreaker Greatsword gives you bonus initiative, which is also really important for this character. So bonus initiative from any item is going to be very useful for us. For that reason, also, this character is a great user of the Gloves of Dexterity. If you don't have another character that wants it, you can wear the Gloves of Dexterity, move these points into Constitution and Wisdom, and have the character be even better at passing initiative saves, and have higher armor class if you're wearing medium armor, etc. Because we have both medium and heavy armor proficiency, we have our choice of all the best armors in the game. The Yuan-Ti Scale Mail is pretty nice for this character because it gives you an initiative bonus while not causing you to lose too much initiative. Pairs very well with the Gloves of Dex as well, or too much armor class. Pairs very well with the Gloves of Dex as well. Other items that give you bonuses to your armor class, like the Cloak of Protection, can be very, very useful for this character also, with the Gloves of Dex, the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail, Cloak of Protection, and a Shield. You have 22 armor class in the early game. I don't know why I dragged the wrong item. You have 22 armor class with this setup, which is respectable, if not incredible, but reasonable enough for a melee character in the late game. You can also get higher armor class with various heavy armor setups, which can such as, for example, the Armor of Persistence, which can make the character much tankier if that's your goal, rather than winning initiative every time. A couple other incredible combos that we get access to. Of course, this is one of the best characters for Falara Louv, because we are a melee character that just wants to hit with our attacks. We don't necessarily need those attacks to hit pretty hard, because most of our damage comes from smites anyways, so Falar is going to be excellent, because while it doesn't hit very hard itself, it buffs up all our damage and all our allies' damage, or lets us bless ourselves so we can hit our attacks much more reliably, and then we can make smite attacks also. So this is one of the absolute best carriers in the game, for one of the absolute best weapons in the game. We also can use the Helm of Arcane Acuity and Band of the Mystic Scoundrel combination, so that whenever we hit with a weapon attack, we gain Arcane Acuity, increasing the save DCs of our spells, and then letting us cast illusion or enchantment spells as a bonus action with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel to lock down enemies with Hold Person or Fear extremely, extremely reliably. Obviously, we've talked about this combination in many, many build guides. It's one of the most well-known and powerful item combos in the game, and this character is excellent at using it. Any item that gives us guaranteed critical hits or increases our critical hit chance, like the Killer's Sweetheart, gives us guaranteed critical hits, which can then be transformed into guaranteed critical smites for incredible bonus damage, and also guaranteed fear effects on enemies are great. And anything that increases our chance of critically hitting, just anything that reduces the number we need to roll a critical hit, is really good for this character as well, with the Covert Cowl playing the example here. Just anything that has reduced critical hit chance or increased critical hit chance is going to be excellent for this character. A couple other specific items that are worth shouting out. One thing this character can run into is lack of spell slots. So there's a couple items in the game that give you spell slot, the most important extra casts of the most important spells for this character. The Servitor of the Black Hand gloves give you an extra cast of Fear every day, and the Steelmaker dagger gives you an extra cast of Hold Person. Those can both be used very effectively just to increase the longevity of the character, and you can swap them out after you have used the spells. This character is pretty easy to gear. Critical hit, initiative, and armor class are what you mostly need, alongside the Shield of the Undevout when you get access to it, and then Helm of Arcane Acuity and Band of the Mystic Scoundrel if you want to maximize your power level and break the game in half. Of course, I also mentioned that this is one of the absolute best characters in the game at using Illithid Powers, because we both attack with and have our save DCs key off of our very high charisma, and we benefit incredibly strongly from two of the strongest Illithid Powers, Luck of the Far Realms for a guaranteed critical hit, which can be a critical smite, and that critical smite can also cause fear to every enemy in a giant AoE around us. And favorable beginnings, the prerequisite for that, which means we hit our attacks much more frequently, and also are much more likely to succeed on our dialogue checks. This is a party face character, so we get double value out of favorable beginnings, because we're both making attack rolls and making dialogue checks, so we're constantly making ability checks, so we get to use both halves of this extremely effectively. Of course, Call the Weak is just incredibly strong also, and we will be able to kind of pop groups of enemies with Call the Weak, since we are getting enemies low. Also, all of the Illithid Powers are extremely powerful for this character, including the ones that have save DCs. The thing that makes this a really good Illithid Power user, though, is how much value we get out of Luck of the Far Realms and Favorable Beginnings. You can really just take those two if you have another character that wants to use tadpoles, but this character is one of the best, so just give it all your tadpoles, in my opinion. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the terrifying Tyrant, and I hope you enjoy seeing your foes cower before you, see them driven before you, and enjoy the lamentations of their goblins. And if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to hit like and leave a comment. It helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who's been watching my videos this year. I really appreciate all of your support. This has been an incredible year for me, for the channel, and it's really exceeded my wildest expectations. And it's thanks to all of your comments and jokes and support and algorithmic interaction. So I really do, this holiday season, want to take a moment to say thank you so much to everybody who's been watching. Really, really appreciate it. It really means a ton to me. And I know that this has not been a great year for everyone, so hopefully these videos have been a bright spot for you if things have been difficult this year, and I really hope that they get better in the new year for as many people as possible. Please take care of yourselves, do something nice for yourself, do something nice for somebody else, and let's all strive to have fun and make the world a better place. Thank you so much, my friends, and I will catch you next time.